Hi everyone, welcome to SGLED's official YouTube page. Today we'll be kind of covering the grow lights you can use coming out, kind of entering into springtime. So this will be about growing indoor house plants, or vegetables or fruits within springtime and the kind of upcoming spring kind of period. What you can do, how you can help this period and kind of get the most out of your plants. So we'll just kind of show you the first kind of grow lights initially, and then we'll go through some kind of suggestions for spring grows, and then we can kind of talk about some brief applications of our lights and then what they can do for you as well within your home. So first of all, you can just take a look at our smallest grow light. This is actually our 10 watt bulb version. So this is actually a daylight beam with a 60-degree angle at 4000 K. So it's a full spectrum beam coming out at 4000 K from a very kind of small scale 10 watt bulb. Obviously this would be kind of applicable for inside the home, especially inside an office or at kind of like a desk or a workstation. So these are kind of very small fitting. They're about the size that they kind of fit into your hand, and they can be applied kind of all around the home in offices or kind of wherever you need. This is actually the 10 watt version. The 15 watt, so this is the 15 watt SGLED full spectrum kind of grow light. This is also full spectrum. The light itself, they all come out at 4000 K. It just kind of their power, their kind of what they consume and the amount of light they put out actually varies. So the formula for the light is actually the same, and the red to blue ratio and all the other colors in the spectrum are all kind of the same for each light. It's just the intensity goes up as the kind of wattage and the power and the size increases as well. So kind of the basic kind of formula and stuff is the same. It's just the intensity and the amount of light coming out and the PPFD, etc. kind of differs as you get bigger and bigger throughout the kind of whole bulb range. However, they are all kind of applicable for different scenarios, different plants, and different kind of phases of the growth cycle. So this is the largest one we have, the 36 watt, and this can kind of be applied within the home, within offices, and they can actually be kind of used in indoor farms as well, kind of medium scale kind of grows as well. We have kind of some projects to do with these kind of relatively, they're not kind of bay lights, but they are bulbs, so it's kind of a medium scale bulb grow covering about 10 meters squared, so there is kind of a whole row of them kind of covering a large number of plants as well. So they're not just for kind of small, kind of to be stuck up inside offices or in the homes. They are used as well across kind of indoor farm kind of projects as well. So they are applicable for all kinds of grows, just depending on the light you want, and kind of if you do need full spectrum light. So what's the kind of main theme that comes out of growing during springtime and your house plants, especially in spring? So most of our house plants are actually tropical plants or flowers or fruits, etc. So coming into spring, they will be coming out of winter dormancy. So what does this mean when you're coming out of winter dormancy? So for plants, they would have been coming out of winter. It would have been cold. They would have not used a lot of energy, and they probably would have shrank in size and not been blossoming. So there's a couple of tricks you can kind of do just to get the plants ready for the new kind of incoming season. So repotting, so it's actually kind of a basic idea, but it's kind of a good idea to start doing before your plants kind of awake from kind of winter and start growing kind of exponentially. So as plants come out of winter dormancy, the roots and the whole of the plant at the top above the soil will grow as well. So if the roots are growing, you will need to buy kind of a bigger plant, kind of change up the soil, as the plants will begin to kind of reach out and stretch for this new kind of sunlight and humid temperature. So a different kind of environment, the plants will begin to reach and become bigger during spring coming out of winter. So just kind of change the pots, repot the plants. It's just kind of a basic thing just to kind of protect the plants and kind of make sure they're doing okay coming out of winter. The next one would be fertilizing. So kind of fertilizing your plants through winter would have been it wouldn't have been very often thing to do or a common thing to do. They wouldn't have used as much energy. They won't be growing. They wouldn't have been kind of blossoming or fruiting or flowering. So you wouldn't have been fertilizing them as much. So coming into spring, you will need to kind of start to fertilize the plants again, as they will be kind of hungry and they are reacting and growing towards the increased sunlight and kind of all the extra energy needed. Another way to kind of clean up the plants before springtime kind of starts and summer towards the kind of flowering season is trimming the plants. So the plants have been kind of trapped indoors in darker, colder areas for the whole of summer, and they would have maybe some leaves have gone brown, some leaves have gone yellow. They have kind of lost their color, so you can kind of just trim them off, start again for the next season. This is kind of a common thing, just to kind of clean up the plants and start again for the kind of upcoming season of growing. So what are growers actually looking for when they're kind of using indoor LED lights over their plants? So you are kind of looking for kind of a maximum yield and shortening the growth cycle. This is what kind of large-scale farmers aim to do using lights, and this is kind of what people do indoors and outdoors. Actually, there are some kind of projects where people apply LED lights also to outdoor plants, especially cucumbers, tomatoes, etc., just to try and accelerate the growth as well. So it's all about kind of getting the lights to work around you and kind of increasing the output of the yield of the lights of the plants. So in terms of lighting plants through each phase, so this is kind of a common question that everybody is kind of debating or asking for on kind of general Amazon pages. Initially we'll just kind of say that it does depend on what plant you actually have or what fruit. It's actually kind of plant dependent. So we'll go for kind of a general approach around lighting each phase. So in terms of seedlings, in general, seedlings are actually the most vulnerable and weakest kind of stage of a plant's life. So you do need to keep the light kind of further away from the seedlings, so the intensity is lower. So the less intensity, the kind of less damage the seedlings will be kind of prone to. So you do kind of need to keep the lights away from the seeds and just kind of reduce the intensity away from them, as this is their most vulnerable stage, just like kind of most plants or most animals. When they're youngest, this is when they're kind of weakest and most vulnerable. So you will need to keep the lights kind of not so intense on them and not kind of too close to them, kind of lighting them up too much. They won't be able to take it and they will kind of struggle. So manufacturers do kind of have recommended installation heights, and these will come in kind of the packaging anyway, but you do just kind of need to keep a general idea of kind of moving the light away from the seedlings. This is probably the furthest the lights will be throughout the whole stage, throughout the whole kind of growth cycle. And as you go down throughout each phase, you will get closer and closer. So after the seedling phase, there is actually the vegetative stage. So this is kind of when the plant is most kind of active for the most intensity amount of light. So 5000K kind of daylight beam, or 4000 to 6000, this kind of range across the whole daylight beam spectrum is actually kind of what the vegetative plant is looking for throughout the whole growth phase. So they are looking for a kind of range of lighting that's full spectrum, including red, blue, green, yellow, etc. From between 4000K to kind of late 5000 to 6000K. So this is kind of summer daylight beams. It's natural. It's kind of working just like an outdoor environment, but kind of you're doing it indoors. So they do look for kind of daylight beams each plant, and they will kind of grow very well off this if you do have them indoors under grow lights. So vegetative stage does kind of require the most intensity. So the light will be closest to the plant, probably closest to the plant. You just need to kind of harden the plant towards it. So you do just need to move it kind of gradually down throughout the weeks and kind of days and times. So just as long as you keep kind of moving the light gradually down, towards the plant will do kind of perfectly fine on these daylight beams. In terms of flowering, you don't actually need too much intensity over the plant itself in general. So when they're flowering or fruiting, from the vegetative stage, the light may be very close, or multiple lights may be very close to the plant. However, as you're kind of coming out of the flowering phase, you will be kind of upping the lights and moving them away further and further from the plant. As they're kind of in the flowering, they don't need as much kind of intensity. So vegetative is the most intensive, and this is when they will be kind of using that daylight beam the most. In terms of kind of distances, we kind of covered it. Specific distances for specific lights will be kind of in the packaging and recommended for each manufacturer. However, we do kind of our general recommendations are kind of, as we just outlined, you go closer and you kind of start off further away, and then you get closer and closer. So you will go down from seedlings all the way down to vegetative, kind of flowering here, and then as flowering keeps coming and happening, and the plant is using the energy, the light will be moving away again to take the intensity away from the fruit or flower or kind of vegetable you're growing. So what are the benefits to SGLED lights through each phase and kind of growing? So for seedlings, the 5000K or 4000K beam, the daylight 4000K beam is very optimal for seedlings. They do kind of work very well off daylight beams, and especially lights with high blue ratio. So the blue ratio within this light is about 19% compared to kind of the red. So it's a red to blue ratio that works between flowering and kind of kind of the germination phase. So with the higher blue ratio within these lights, it can kind of promote germination, speed it up, and you will be getting a stronger, kind of healthier seedling growing into the vegetative stage. In terms of vegetation, maybe a 10 watt, the intensity maybe a little lower, just depends on what kind of plant or flower you're using. For very small kind of plants, the 10 watt will be perfectly fine. Just to have it very close in intensity over each plant, and then you can kind of scale up if you think it's not enough. So you will just kind of have it, say this is the plant here, it will be very close, bringing up the intensity and kind of bringing all the light onto the plant itself. Things to watch out for with our lights. The good thing about having a 10 watt is it can kind of fit in between plants as well. So if you do have kind of, if you need to interplant light, this kind of 10 watt will just kind of screw in, fit anywhere with the E26 bulb. So you can just kind of screw it in here. It can go in between plants and provide the lower kind of area of the plant with some kind of daylight. In general, a lot of plants actually kind of struggle if they're kind of just being lit from vertically. So if you're just vertically lighting each plant, as it gets bigger and bigger, the canopy gets wider and more leaves and covering. The lower portion of the plant is not getting what it needs, so there may be a weaker stem, weaker roots, and the fruit itself may be kind of losing taste or sugar, especially if it's kind of berries or berries, kind of strawberries, blueberries, etc. So putting a 10 watt bulb is actually not, it's kind of a pretty good idea in terms of just kind of evening out the light spread. So although our beams are very even, they are evenly distributed from the whole face. If it's vertically lit, you're not going to kind of cover a big plant that's developing in vegetation. So kind of stick one on top, stick one to the side if you need, or in between the plants, in between rows, kind of interplant lighting. This is kind of what professional farms do. Indoor farms aim for this, and kind of adding a 10 watt bulb in between plants, etc. will do this as well. So using a combination of each bulb to kind of up the intensity and spread the light across each area of the plant is kind of the best way to go when you're lighting the plant. So what are the benefits to SGLED lights? What makes them stand out? The heat sink kind of dissipates the heat away from the LED chips, moving it through the hollow body of the bulb. So when you're using these in very small areas, or kind of high numbers, high quantity in a small area, the heat dissipation kind of makes it superior to other kind of LED lights. Heat is kind of the biggest issue for LEDs, especially the chips themselves on the front of the light. So if you can remove the heat away from this, this is kind of going to prolong the life of the light. In terms of kind of why are LEDs or SGLED lights kind of optimal for lighting plants indoors, it's because the kind of lower heat they run at. So there's no kind of threat towards the light. The plants being burnt indoors, if you do have them very close in the vegetative or seedling or flowering phase, the heat will be dissipating upwards away from the plant itself, and it won't be getting burnt. There is a risk to kind of doing this under other lights and getting them burnt. So we just kind of covered the basics of what you can do in springtime to kind of help your plants kind of thrive coming out of winter dormancy. And if you just kind of head over to our Amazon page, there will be some, if you take a look in the question boxes or our kind of general descriptions, there are more details on the specifications of each light, the 10 watt, 36 watt, 24 watt, or the 15 watt here in the middle. So you just need to head over to our pages, take a look, see what you want, see what kind of requirements your plants have. For bigger scales, obviously you would go up to 36. Smaller scales, in terms of very small rooms, offices, desks, I would go 10 watt and a 15 watt. Or if I'm kind of into plant lighting, I would go 10 watt or 15 watts kind of around the body of the plant. And then I would maybe have a 36 or 24 over the plants on the top, kind of covering the canopy, covering the body of the plant, and just kind of promoting photosynthesis faster, easier, and just kind of making sure the plant thrives throughout the whole spring.